The rumors have already started, Mets fans, and the New York Mets are right in the thick of things. A former general manager weighs in on what it would take for our New York Mets to acquire a legitimate ace that could lead us to the postseason in 2026. We're going to get to that next on Metcast. What's going on, Mets fans? Welcome back to another episode of Metcast. As always, I am Ray, and if you're enjoying this content, all I ask you to do is like and subscribe. Turn those notifications on so you never miss an upload, especially when Dan and I host our live streams with our guests, such as Joe DeMayo, who we just had on, and John Harper, both who host shows over at SNY. And today we're going to be discussing a player that I have been calling for the New York Mets to go after for almost 2 years now. And yes, that is left-handed pitcher from the Detroit organization, Tarik Skubal, who is going to be going into his final year of arbitration this season. And there's no doubt this guy is a perennial Cy Young candidate at 29 years old. And yes, one thing that we've heard over and over in the offseason is how David Stearns may have to change how he approaches these off seasons and whether or not he's going to be willing to give a pitcher who is 30 or older a long-term extension. Last year, you saw guys like Burns out there, Max Fried, and he passed them up for a short 3-year contract when it comes to Sean Manaea, which turned around and bit the New York Mets in the butt, something we have done so much in our history. Instead of going after the Matt Hollidays, we pursue the Jason Bays. Instead of going after JT Realmuto, we go after James McCann. And last year, instead of going after Max Fried or Corbin Burns, who you can't predict an injury, let me explain that to you, but instead of going after one of those two frontline guys, we settle for the Sean Manaeas, another B option, and it bit us in the rear end. And he's going to be here over the next 2 years, making $25 million per season. But that can all be fixed with a mega trade. And we're talking about Tarik Skubal. Now, I want to get into former GM Jim Duquette on his package on what he thinks it would take for the New York Mets to acquire a frontline starter like Tarik Skubal. And then after that, our guy Dan Bartels, who is obviously a host here on Metcast, gave our own prediction earlier in the day. We'll see how they match up. And actually, you may be a little surprised at who's giving more up in these trades. Let's give it a look.
What would it take to get the Mets into the conversation?
Well, I just mentioned Corbin Burns. I mean, you have to go back to that. Garrett Crochet last year with the Red Sox, that deal, although Crochet didn't have any.
Now, before we get to his full comments, let's take a quick look at it. Infielder, outfielder, Jet Williams, who's currently playing shortstop majority of the time. Some project as a center fielder, but probably a second baseman, elite level second baseman at the next level. Going into last year, was widely regarded as the New York Mets #1 prospect and top 100 prospect in the system. Carson Bench, a guy who shot up last year, completely tore it up at AA, ended the season down in AAA, and most suspect he's the actual future center fielder of this club. First round pick in David Stearns' first draft, has been absolutely killing it. Lefty power bat, gap to gap, plays a solid center field. I could see him being a 25-25, if not better, type of player in regard to home runs and stolen bases. And then you have either Brandon Sproat or Jonah Tung, one or two of those guys. If I had my preference, believe it or not, I am kind of against the grain here. I would prefer to give up a Jonah Tung rather than Brandon Sproat. And I understand the upside of Jonah Tung, but we are trying to win it all next season with this type of move. And I think Brandon Sproat is much more polished than a guy like Jonah Tung, who obviously has the upside. But one thing that scares the bejesus out of me is, remember, we keep hearing the comparisons to a Tim Lincecum. And one thing that derailed Lincecum at the end of his career, he lost a little bit of velocity and nobody knew how to mess with his mechanics or correct his mechanics. They were stuck at looking old videos of him trying to interpret his mechanics. And it's a similar thing to Jonah Tung because their deliveries are so unorthodox. So if Jonah Tung gets out of sorts, Who's going to get him right? We're not totally sure. And then the final piece in this deal would be first base outfielder. But let's be real. Ryan Clifford is a future first baseman, a guy who was tearing it up down in Double-A, a high swing and miss guy. I believe he ended in the mid 230s, but he has some of the best raw power to come through the system probably since Pete Alonso, and that's my major league comparison for him. But the other thing with him is he is a lefty first baseman. So if the New York Mets think they're going to lose out on Pete Alonso potentially this offseason, maybe there's a guy like Ryan Clifford who they don't want to include on a trade. But if the Mets do retain Alonso, depending on whether it's going to be a DH or a first base, but if they plan on him playing first base for the next 2 to 3 years, you've got to capitalize. While Ryan Clifford at 22 years old has a ton of potential, but he would be 24, 25 years old by the time Alonso is getting ready to either move to a full-time DH or get out of here. That's going to kill his value. You move on for him now. So I'm not totally opposed to getting rid of Ryan Clifford, but I really do like him as a prospect. Going into last year, my two favorite prospects were Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat, both who I covered down at spring training, but let's keep listening.
Anywhere near the innings and the hardware that Skubal has. So here's what it would get you in the conversation. I don't think it gets it done. It would have to be one of either Jet Williams or Carson Benj, probably pushing on Benj. Every team's asking for Benj right now. Yep. One of a Sproat or Tong, and then another prospect like a Ryan Clifford, something along those lines. That would be similar to what the Brewers got in return from the Orioles, although it's a little heavier, I think, for Skubal than Burns, what the Orioles gave up, and understandably so. I mean, this was probably going to be the second Cy Young award for Skubal in a row, 2 years in a row. So, the price is going to be very, very high. I wouldn't do it. I keep battling, but I wouldn't pull him out of the trade.
That's the other option still. If you don't want to go after Skubal, do you go after a guy like Michael King, who's got an injury history, but his ERA is consistently in the twos? Outside of last year's final start, it was around 2.78. But you look at the guys who are supposed to be aces coming into this offseason. I mean, does Ranger Suarez really hype anybody up? Or how about Dylan Cease? Dylan Cease, if you go back and look at his last 4 years, he's great, bad, great, bad. That's what it's been. His ERA was almost 5 last year. Yeah, he throws 97, 98, but he can't control it, and he got hit like crazy last year in San Diego. So this market is kind of calmed down a little. I know our guy John Harper likes the Ranger Suarez. A lot of guys like the Ranger Suarez, but I am never been a fan of the soft-tossing lefty. He's probably going to get 6 years considering what the market's looking like out there. That's a little steep for me. I'm not going to lie.
Necessarily. I would try to obviously negotiate it down, just stay on it until he trades him, or hopefully, he just keeps him. But it's going to be expensive. There's no way around it. And, those are some prospects that I think I would hold because I think they can help the major league team here in New York.
Now, here is the trade from our Metcast account, courtesy of our host, Dan Bartels, and it includes a little bit more, actually probably a lot of it more, and I actually think this does get it done. You heard Jim Duquette saying it's going to cost more, and here's the deal. We would get Tarik Skubal back. Going back would be David Peterson, who's also in the final year of his contract. Maybe Detroit wants to extend him potentially. Jonah Tong, who is widely regarded around Major League Baseball. I think he's probably the better prospect in regard to Brandon Sproat, because Tong is widely considered a top 100 prospect in the Met system. Most people have him top 25 throughout MLB. Sproat's not even in the top 25. He has Jet Williams, who we just spoke about, Ryan Clifford, and then he's adding a Brett Beatty into this trade, and that's a hefty price. I would probably try to throw Mark Vientos, maybe a potential other prospect, but that might be what it takes to get a Tarik Skubal. But I have to preface this as well. This trade, if it goes down, must come with an extension. There's no trade without an extension. You cannot give up everything for a guy like this, clean out your farm system, and then not extend him. I will say this. Joe DeMayo the other day, who I will link the video at the end of this video. If you haven't seen it, you got to check it out. Said he's waiting for David Stearns to make that Christian Yelich trade that he did in Milwaukee. And that's what I got for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. What is your best trade package, your best that you would consider giving up for a Tarik Skubal, or are you just completely not interested and you want to go in a different round? Maybe a Peralta from the Brewers, maybe a Michael King, a Dylan Cease, a Ranger Suarez. Let me know down in the comments. I love chatting up with you guys there. Don't forget to like and subscribe, turn those notifications on, consider becoming a member, join the team, join the Metcast crew, which is going over 40 strong now as we have exclusive content coming out for you guys. Also, you get prioritized in our live streams and you always get to have your voices heard, excuse me. But that's all I got for you guys. As always, let's go Mets. God bless.